This is Lorin of the Roach Koach podcast, and you're listening to Discography Discussion.
This one activates the pit.
And if you follow the leader while you twist and chi, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan. Ladies and gentlemen, Lorin Kozlowski of the Roach Koach podcast. We are talking about Korn tonight.
Happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. Our co-host Jeff is currently not in the U.S. He's on a family vacation. We had to find a soul that wanted to talk about Korn. And Lorin was happy to oblige.
Happy to oblige. Absolutely.
So as you all may or may not know, we have already talked about Korn before. But we kind of have a rule that we've been cooking up, and basically we're willing to talk about any band at least 2 times. The first time we're going to do the hardcore, all right, this album. But usually for the second one, when we do a revisited, we're looking at just doing more of like a general discussion. So if that's not your bag, tune in next week. We were actually lucky enough to hit enough subscribers on our Patreon to where we finally don't have to pay for our own web hosting, which is really nice. And that just blows my mind, to be honest. There's 2 people I want to thank for that. That's Dave Cassidy and Jeff Santos. You guys are our lifeblood. I cannot believe that you would throw money at our podcast. And
you're getting to the Patreon shout-outs early on this one, aren't you, Dan?
Dude, I was blown away, like, seeing those come through, because, I mean, we set the Patreon up a long time ago, and it was one of those, like, if somebody feels like we're cool enough to send us some money, that's great, but I didn't think anybody was actually going to do it, so that part of it's really cool. So I just want to shout you guys out and let you know that you are in on the ground level on our individual album reviews and Patreon exclusive stuff, which we'll talk about later at the end of the show.
So Lorin Kozlowski is on the show.
Yes, he is.
What's been going on, man?
I'm getting done with a week of catching up with Korn, who, I mean, if you've listened to our show, we've done 3 Korn albums on our podcast now. We did the first, the self-titled, we did the Life is Peachy, and we did Follow the Leader.
Yep.
And
live on Follow the Leader.
We did a live episode for Follow the Leader. And for anybody who's not familiar with our show, we're an all new metal podcast, and we are creating a new metal canon. So we are every episode we listen to one new metal album or an album that people have told us is new metal, and we listen to it and decide if it's worthy of being inducted into our new metal canon. And it's funny that you had me on because, as I would say, our big thing that people still comment to us to this day, and we're coming up on 100 episodes, is that we did not induct the first Korn album into the canon. We inducted Blind, we inducted Shoots and Ladders, but we did not induct the whole album. And
blasphemy.
That's what people say, but we stand by it.
See, I stand by that decision every time you justify it, because the first Korn record, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit right into the discussion, but here we go. It's basically a rock record with hip-hop California influences. There's nothing new metal about it. New metal wasn't a thing, so it kind of led the way to what would become new metal, but it wasn't new metal.
Our rationale was that it's new metal, but it's not great. That was, which I think might actually be more inflammatory. So, yeah. I mean, the thing is that they get better. So, and the whole point is, Blind is great, but there's a lot of filler on that record. There's a lot of 5.5-minute songs on that record. And, and having sat down and listened to all the albums, they've learned some lessons from that first record, for sure. They've also not, be that as it may, but we'll get into it. How do you guys want to start? Where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where the first record, since we're there already, the first record to me is, there's a lot of, it's hard for me to separate sometimes my emotional attachment to that record, because, I think, a guy like me could relate to a lot of the lyrics that were on the first album. And sometimes when you relate to the lyrics, there's a certain sort of rose-tinted glasses that you view the music through, where you're like, this is fucking great, even if like you're actually skipping songs and you're not, because I noticed with the first Korn record, the biggest issue I have with it is that it's a little dry. Like there's just something about it where like Korn became famous on Follow the Leader and albums after that by creating kind of this atmosphere using a lot of guitar effects and a lot of like really cool sounding like electronic influences. And then none of that is on the first Korn record. That record is just straight down-tuned, really crunchy riffage, and they're really obsessed with their riffs, and they rely on them almost to the point of like endless repetition. And that record definitely comes across as a little dry now. I mean, we're coming on like what, 94, so 2004, 2014. It's like what, 24 years?
Yeah.
of God, I feel old. It doesn't sound as original as maybe it did back then. And I think that Korn, especially on a song like Blind, for some reason, all of those elements came together and worked really well, but it didn't come together and work really well 12 times in a row, on a record.
I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily hold the datedness so much against it as just the fact of Blind is such a strong open, which we very much value, and it kind of sets the template also of like how you going to start a new metal record. And it's like, well, Blind's one of the best ways to do it. I mean, I feel like if you jack with the sequencing in any way, you throw Blind in the middle of the album, I feel like it's not as beloved. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I feel like it would be, because if you start with something like Ball Tongue or Need To or something like that, it's not going to have the same effect. Having that build up, it by having Blind be the first song, it immediately becomes iconic. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because then you can basically eat off of that forever, which they did, which they have. So, I mean, the thing is, I love Blind. I love Chutes and Ladders. Clown's all right, but the thing is just that, listening to that record, and when we did it for the show, I listened to it, I think like 4 times. And, this track lengths just start to wear you down,
It's boring,
The first 2 albums, and I remember saying this on our original episode about Korn, where the self-titled record feels very complete. The follow-up, Life is Peachy, felt like B-sides. It felt like we had the same sound, the same feel, but this was the leftover crap. And when I listen to this record, the main thing that stands out to me is the songs feel complete, but then they have these really out of place segues into each other. It felt like we had a really good thing going, or a really good rock, or a really good metal thing, and then we just stopped and kind of grooved for a minute. And then you get these long track lengths where that's the ending of every song and this is what's going into the next song. You forget about that when you're not listening to the whole record and you're only listening to your favorites and the greatest hits. The only song I think that could lead off this record would be Chutes and Ladders.
I don't think so, because Chutes and Ladders is like a minute of bagpipe music. And you'd have to cut that for the radio single. And I think people would think that the band was a joke, lyrically, if that was their lead-off track.
Well, that's why everybody likes Chutes and Ladders, is everybody understands the joke.
Right, but they understand it in the sense that it's only a joke because it's further down in the track listing. Yeah. You have slightly more serious subject matter prior to that. And I think like what Lorin said, it's one of those, if you fuck with the sequencing at all, nobody's going to get to Blind. You're going to listen to, because I've got tons of new metal records that tried to emulate this sound. It's like everybody felt like, maybe in 1998, 1999, well, we can't rip off Korn directly like Follow the Leader or Issues without it being blatantly obvious that that's what we're doing. So a lot of these bands went back to the first Korn record and kind of tried to emulate that. And a lot of those records are boring as piss. I mean, just so they just drag on and on and on. Korn at least had a little bit of a sensibility in that they had, I would say on the first record, you have probably 3 songs that are single worthy that are going to carry people through. So like you listen to a song like Blind, you're immediately amped up. And that's going to carry you through to the next song that kind of makes you feel the same way. And that's what gets you through some of those maybe a little bit more boring songs. And as hard as I try, I can't save the end of the album.
No.
It exists.
It is a slog.
But it's not something that you can.
It is a slog. It is super emotional, but like only for John Davis.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I feel for him. And on the original Korn episode, I went on and on about how like, you don't understand how he feels, man, because, you weren't abused as a child and blah, 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 all that stuff. But like, as far as like a pure listening purely just for the music, and if Jeff was here, that's what he would be going on about. Is that it's the music itself that is important and what keeps him going. But for me, being a huge lyrical guy, I feel like Korn maybe went a little too far in a lot of the songs. And
well, it's you get so self-indulgent that it no longer. It's like they have enough on there that hits chords with people and is resonant, and it comes off. And the thing is, this is something that I noticed because I went and read a bunch of reviews for the later records as I was listening to them, and the thing that a lot of people pointed out is that after the first 3 albums, Korn gets less personal. The lyrics get more vague, they get more general, they're more all-purpose, and that the whole point of that was to expand the audience, because that is still the thing with the first Korn album, is that when you listen to it, it's obviously kicks off this genre and everything, but its success surprises people because it is not a for everybody record. It's still a very niche record in a ton of ways, not just for the sound of the guitars and everything, which is very weird sounding at the time and is still an unusual sound, but also just like lyrically, it's this very raw, emotional thing to the point where you're like, this guy's giving me too much, I like the delivery, because that's the thing that really struck me like through all of these albums, which I cannot stress enough. What a journey to listen to all these, because I had to listen to them all this week in like back to back to back to back, and I would
welcome
be up.
to our world.
Welcome to Discography Discussion. Yeah.
I'd be up and then I'd be down. I'd be like, what is I always say, like, I think my high point was probably Issues, and my low point was like halfway through See You on the Other Side.
Ooh,
I was like, oh man, I'm feeling pretty low right now. And then, varying levels of that to the end. These just going back with those lyrics and just noticing that I'm not, there's less to really be like, whoa, about on the later records.
Sure.
There isn't, because he's become less personal. And then obviously when you get to Korn 3, Remember Who You Are, which is, I almost wish that was an attempt to make, like you said, that Life is Peachy was like the self-titled album again, just to try again. I almost wish Korn 3 had been that again, because I feel like that would have been better than what they gave us.
Absolutely.
I think if they'd gone in there with Head, if they'd had the full band with Ross, maybe, but even then, it just, that record, honestly, I was surprised of all that record, of all their albums when I listened to it on this re-listen, that one felt the most like just an out and out dud.
Absolutely.
Which I did not expect.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because like that record, especially with the title, Remember Who You Are, it doesn't really remember who Korn is, because that's what you would expect, right? When a record's called Remember Who You Are, you're thinking, oh man, they're going back.
Right. They got Ross with them. Yeah,
greatest new metal producer of all time on board.
Yeah,
they're in the studio. They're laying their hearts out for us, and you get an album that maybe if it wasn't a Korn record, it might be okay, but it's not really that listenable. Like,
it's funny as I was trying to think of when I had listened to it last, and I know I listened to it a couple times, like when it came out, and thinking that it was like half good, like it had a bunch of songs up top, and then it sort of tapered off, as a lot of these later Korn albums do. But listening to it this time, I was almost tuned out like by the third song. Yeah, like I was like, oh, there's nothing here. And then reading up on it, like Jonathan Davis has said that like it was a mistake to try to do it again with Ross, because Ross basically it should just be a situation of him with young bands. He's like, we're all like grown men, and he's trying to do like the same tricks, and it's like it doesn't work anymore. Because I guess he made Jonathan Davis sing one of the songs at his wife in the booth, and it just was like a real awkward situation, as I would imagine.
Right.
And it's and when you listen to it when I was listening to it, I didn't even check like which song it was, but there isn't really any vocal performance from Jonathan Davis on that album that's really like a mind blower in comparison to stuff that he does on Serenity of Suffering or even Paradigm Shift, which was, a surprise for me.
Right. I mean, they definitely, I mean, you have a vocalist that's this iconic, this instantly recognizable. I don't think anybody can say that John Davis isn't an original vocalist.
Oh,
I mean, he is absolutely like the blueprint of who you want to be if you're playing that style. And it's weird hearing him kind of falter and do things that, like it almost seems like a young band would do, like this late in their career. I mean, I'm all about growth. I'm all about like experimentation. But, we already got that on Issues. We got that on Untouchables. You know what I mean? So, like, I almost feel like kind of, if it's a midlife crisis or whatever, it's like they've kind of already gone past that. Like, I mean, Follow the Leader doesn't sound like the first Korn album by any means. And it's one of those things where part of the biggest things is John Davis's actual vocal variety. Because he wasn't very versatile on the first two records. He kind of just did the same shit that he did before. He would sing, oftentimes out of key, not that great. I mean, it had kind of a primal edge to it, so, like, you kind of still respected it for not, even though it wasn't great. But you still, you felt for him. But, like, you get to an album like Remember Who You Are, and you're like, well, I've already listened to, like, 3 or 4 albums of him sounding amazing, and now all of a sudden he's kind of like, because I do see a little bit of an attempt to go back to the old sound, but like it doesn't really work in that context. It's almost just like it wasn't the right time. Like, if anything, like the Paradigm Shift or Serenity of Suffering should have been called Remember Who You Are.
I would say that's an absolutely perfect title for Serenity of Suffering. I mean, Serenity of Suffering is, in my opinion, if I were to rank like top Korn records, I'd probably go Follow the Leader. No, I'd go Issues, Follow the Leader, Serenity of Suffering. Serenity of Suffering is like front to back, and it's 40 minutes long. It's like they figured it all out on the record.
It's perfect. Nuts. Yeah, it's honestly, it's weird this late in their career that, like, maybe besides like Issues, because I've got like a really personal connection to Issues. That's my like that's my favorite Korn record. But but Serenity of Suffering comes damn close, and it's one of those things where it's like we figured out how to be weird and cool and dark or whatever, but still write a record that like Korn fans at the very least are gonna not skip any songs on. And like,
yeah, there's nothing to skip on that record. Yeah,
because like even Follow the Leader, which is just such a landmark record for the band, I don't know if the sequencing is great on that one. It's a little all over the place, and I think it's kind of like that record doesn't flow like the later, well, at least the last two Korn albums flow. Like there wasn't as much, because like, I mean, on Follow the Leader you had like 3 or 4 really great Korn songs, and then you had like a rap song, and then you had like, that weird, whatever you want to call All in the Family. It was just this really weird
classic. That's what you call it,
dude. You know what? All in the Family was a great song when I was 15.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
talk about bad aging, man. You can't. Yeah, we were joking about it on the show. We're like, if they were to do that song live now, if they were to do a tour with Limp Bizkit and have Fred come out, they'd have to rewrite like everything. Like, none of it flies.
I'd still go see it, but yeah, it's one of those like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
like but there are things, and I was talking to my wife about this the other night about how much the world has changed just in the past 12 months. Like, the world is almost like, as far as being socially conscious goes, the world is a completely different place now than it was back when we did the first Korn episode, which wasn't that long ago to my knowledge, but like, we talked about some of the lyrical concepts as if like, yeah, it's a little rough around the edges, but it's understandable. But like, sitting here now, I'm like, shit, there's some stuff that they said that is not understandable, that is not relatable.
Absolutely.
And
let me ask you guys this. In your Korn fandom, where was your cutoff where you basically stopped listening? Unless you guys have continued to listen to them the whole time. Like, where was your cutoff when you like stopped really following them?
For me, it was probably Take a Look in the Mirror, to be honest. And it's weird because I stopped listening to the band for a reason that was probably not what the general public's reason would have been to stop listening, because it's really easy to say that like when Brian Head Welch left, that's when the band's sound disappeared.
Right.
Which is factual as far as I can tell.
I
you
could
agree. Definitely hear missing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
However, for me, it was whenever I heard Take a Look in the Mirror, it was the very first Korn album that I'd heard that wasn't like moving forward in their sound, because we jokingly called Take a Look in the Mirror Life is Peachy Part 2, in the sense,
really,
yes, in the sense that like there's a lot of stuff wrong with that record that's not necessarily obvious at the forefront. The first thing that I have a problem with is the contradictory lyrics. Because, and this was on Life is Peachy as well, like a contradiction between the way the lyrics were presented in the first Korn album versus how they were presented in Take a Look in the Mirror, or even in Life is Peachy. In that, in the first Korn album, John Davis is a victim. He's a victim of bullying. Or, there's definitely a lot of lyrics there that are very like, I'm in high school and I'm getting picked on by people that are homophobes or people that are, that don't understand me and don't get me. And so, like, and you see that return a little bit in like Issues, when he talks about like the song Thoughtless, which is a song kind of like about kids being picked on in high school. I
think Thoughtless is on Untouchables.
Oh, what did I say? Issues?
You said Issues.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. We're going through 12 records, bro.
Yeah. It's Untouchables. When he talks on Thoughtless about like being picked on and all that, like, it's one of those things where like I'm like, I get where you're coming from. Like, I got picked on in high school too. I get it. I relate to it. But then you get to like Life is Peachy, where he's talking about like beating people's ass and being the aggressor and being like the person that starts shit with people. And like, even look at like Take a Look in the Mirror. He's like, that song Right Now, he's like, I'm feeling mean today. I want to find out who I'm going to kick around. Like that sort of stuff is very contradictory to quote unquote the band's message, so to speak, in the sense of like, I'm pissed off, so I'm going to find the next random person I can find, and I'm going to fuck with them, and I'm going to start a fight with this person. And so it's really weird, because it's like, you go all the way back in their history and you're like, well, he's complaining about like being weak, physically weak, and being picked on by these aggressors. But then Korn also has songs about how like John Davis is the aggressor. You know, like
Yeah.
is the one that's pissed off and like he's just gonna start a fight with whoever, and like he makes fun of people for being weak, and like there's even like some of their lyrics, especially on like the biggest example that sticks out to me is on The Path of Totality, where he talks about how he's gonna rape somebody. Like I'm just
Jesus.
I'm just like, holy shit, dude! Like inconsistent much. You know, like
Well, I will be honest, like I having, doing our show and listening to the level of new metal that we have, that seems to be par for the course for the genre.
Absolutely.
That you're going to run between self-pity and overt aggression in track to track.
Sure.
You're going to have one track where it's like, woe's me, and the next track is like, I'm going to kill you and bury your body in a field.
Right.
You bitch.
Well, because that's how you deal with self-pity.
Right.
Is you go immediately to the other end and say,
Exactly,
fuck you. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, my drop-off was actually the Untitled record.
Okay. Okay.
That's a good place to stop.
That was where I when I bought it the day it came out, even though I was like mixed on See You on the Other Side, which at the time I remember being very excited for, because I thought Twisted Transistor was different. It was something.
Great radio single.
And so I picked that one up, and I remember like halfway through it being like, what is going on here? This is like a bad record. And listening to it for this show, I remembered like none of it. Like none of that record. I clearly must have given that record maybe 2 listens. Like I did not, listen to that whole record very often. And yeah, that one's literally them just like working with Atticus Ross, trying to figure out what to do, but they don't have any songs.
Yeah, they're missing a guitarist. They're missing a drummer.
Oh yeah.
So half the band's gone essentially. You got John, Fieldy, and oh wait, that's it, isn't it?
No, John Fieldy and Monkey.
And Monkey, sorry, God, poor Monkey. I don't give Monkey enough credit.
But the thing that's funny is that immediately when you go from take a look in the mirror to See on the Other Side, immediately the fact that they did not replace Head, that they just decided to continue on with one guitarist, immediately the sound is thinner, and
absolutely
immediately you notice that a big part of it is this sound that really I think peaks out on tops out on Untouchables, which is that the guitars are so huge and so monstrous that it's like just a wave that hits you. You get into those choruses and it's just like boom, boom. And even if you're not totally with the song, those guitars carry you through. So when you lose one of those guys and still try to have that level of power, it doesn't quite work. And then, with See on the Other Side, they luck out with that record in that they have other people writing the songs with them.
Right.
So any sort of issues they were having on that front carry them through. I still think that record is way too long. And it's also got a bonus disc, which I did not listen to.
Yeah, why?
I should say. But that record's super long, but it's got moments, and here's the thing, they still play Coming Undone in concert, which kind of surprises me because that's not the song I would pick from that record.
It's not the strongest, yeah. I mean, it's weird too, like when Head left too, is that like, yeah, you're right that they didn't replace him. I mean, how many new metal guitarists could they have hired? Like anybody, right? Who would have passed up the opportunity to be in Korn?
I think it speaks to the level of the importance that he played to their sound. And also, I mean, I think a lot of people at the time thought it was like, well, you have 2 guitarists. One of those guys is redundant anyway. And I think they even in press early on tried to play it down. Like, listen, Monkey was writing all the music anyway. Head wasn't really bringing that much to the table, which immediately proves itself to be untrue.
Obviously untrue.
When you listen to
100%.
that first Brian Head Welch solo record, there's the Korn sound. You've never heard it.
I've not listened to it.
I am willing to put this show on pause so you can go listen to one song.
No, we're not doing that. It's too late at night. I got Easter in the morning. Come on.
I have listened to like half of the Love and Death record.
Yes, yeah.
Which I mean, like it has a Korn sound to it, so I mean I believe it. But yeah, I haven't listened. I own it. I bought it for the show. We haven't, obviously, not even close to doing it yet.
Sure.
But we have. I have a copy of it. You want to check my credentials?
No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah. I mean that's the thing is, yeah. Once they lose head, and then they sort of flail through that, and then yeah, when you get to the Untitled record, I mean, yeah. On top of that, yeah, they don't have that. They don't even have like the drummer anymore. And this is an interesting thing that just happened to come up. I'm currently reading David Lee Roth's memoir, which I highly recommend. It's bananas. And in it, he talks at one point about what was going on in his life post Van Halen and the records that he made. And how basically when he made Eat 'Em and Smile, he was like, he had a good band, he liked everybody he was working with, it was great. But with each subsequent record, he started to like lose people. And that by the time, I don't remember the names of these David Lee Roth records, but there was a certain point where he basically had fired a bunch of people and just brought in various people. And he's like, everyone felt unsteady, and he's like, and you can tell in the music because we didn't have a solid foundation. And then literally read that the next day. I listened to literally Untitled and Remember Where You Are and everything, like back to back, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what's happening here.
Absolutely.
Like they don't have a solid foundation, and they're just like don't know what to do.
Totally directionless.
One thing I have to correct is David Silvera was still involved with the band for See You on the Other Side. Good luck listening to the record and detecting that, because it's clear they were working with a hip-hop producer. So
he was replaced by electronic drums.
The big thing with the drums on See on the Other Side is that they produce them like pop drums and not metal drums. The drums on Untouchables are huge.
Absolutely.
Like giant. They sound great. I mean, they better. It's like a $4 million record.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the drums on Take a Look in the Mirror. Once again, big drums. But yeah, they're real thin sounding. They don't do it any favors. And then they have sort of the same problem with on Untitled, because for one, they're running between two different drummers, but the other is that they have Atticus Ross, who's, Nine Inch Nails guy. Nine Inch Nails is generally not trafficking in big drums.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's some times, and that's the thing. That's kind of the surprising thing about the drum sound on With Teeth, is that it's so big. But then it's like, well, it's Dave Grohl. He might have said something like, "Hey, don't fuck with my sound."
Right. Nobody's going to question Dave Grohl. Yeah. Look.
At least when it comes to drumming, I won't question him. So
nice.
So let's talk about the dubstep record, you guys.
Before I leave the room while these two assholes talk about the dubstep record, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to this podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here at Discography Discussion. We've actually added functionality to our Facebook page recently where you can leave us a review directly on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/Discography Discussion, you can actually leave us a 5-star review there. If it's not 5 stars, you don't think we deserve it, leave us whatever review you think we deserve, and we will read it on the show, and we will take your criticism into account.
And now Lorin is going to get the hell out of my house.
Oh, boy. The path of totality.
Yes. Well, Joe, I mean, what do you think of the record?
I think dubstep is complete bullshit. It used to be this really cool thing that was really static and strange and, off-tempo, fast dance beats with little hip-hop and 808 drums and shit like that. And then this guy did this really original thing where he kind of manipulated the sounds he was making into like siren noises, and it was original. It was something that I had never heard anybody do before. And then everybody started doing it. And then everybody started featuring that guy on their albums. And then everybody sounded exactly the same. And it's absolutely terrible. And I'm shaking in my fucking chair while I sit here and try to talk about it while it plays on my headphones. I feel like you're torturing me on purpose.
I mean, I'm not torturing you on purpose. I mean, it's the discography, and we got to discuss it. It's your show, man.
I know.
If you named this show Discography Discussion, except for the one record we don't like, this would have been an easy skip.
But it would have been Discography Discussion except for any album featuring that guy. See, I won't even say his name. Everybody knows who I'm talking about.
All right. Okay. So you're not a Spring Breakers fan. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I, when this record came out, I was incredibly skeptical of it. And when I heard it, and I think I was telling this to you, Dan, in a text earlier, I couldn't finish the record.
Right.
It was unlistenable. I couldn't get through it. And then every time I would try, I would never get through it. I will tell you, for this show, I got through the whole album. And the thing that I found is that it's like, I think with bonus tracks, it's like 12 songs long, something like that.
Yeah.
Let me double check. I want to make sure my number here is right. Yeah, on Apple Music, it has 13 songs.
Ooh.
2 of those are bonus tracks. That's about 12 longer than it needs to be. Because it does the same thing every single song. It does the same sort of like wub 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 sound. They have different people featured: Excision, Downlink, Noisia, Skrillex, whatever. But they still don't. You can't really tell. It could be anybody. But that being said, it was more listenable this time. Removed, what is it? 7 years removed. That record came out in 2011. So 7 years difference. It sounds incredibly dated, but a little more listenable now because of how dated it is. And I think maybe just we've heard, I don't know, more aggressive things. I don't know. But the thing that's funny about it, though, is that when I look at it, it's, I hate to say this, but it's good they made it because it kind of got them out of their rut.
I don't know, honestly, how much the band had to do with this, because my interpretation of it from listening to the parts I've listened to is this was John Davis hanging out with his studio remix buddies. Because, he tried to do that DJ thing for a while.
J-Devil.
He stole that name from me. It was a fucking good name. I'll give him that.
So you're saying there's like a bunch of J-Devil tracks that we haven't heard?
There's an idea.
Okay.
Says the man who had the brilliant idea to do Gabriel Gray.
Absolutely.
It was a brilliant fucking idea, by the way.
It's going to happen.
Well, I'm just checking to see. I've got the liner notes here in front of me, and I'm just trying to see if, like, writing credit-wise. Because, it still credits the whole band.
Which is just John, Monkey, and Fieldy, right?
Here's the thing. It looks like everybody's got a writing credit on every single song.
Okay.
So if I were to guess that maybe there are unwubbed versions of all these songs.
That'd be interesting.
And there's a couple in there that, like, you can basically hear it's basically a Korn. They're all basically Korn songs. But there are some that sound closer to, there are actually some late album ones that I'd never even made it to, I think, in my first listens because I couldn't do it. That, I'm like, yeah, you just turn the guitar up a little bit more, turn this wub down, and it's a Korn song. Lyrically, like you said, it's got those rape lines that really just sort of throw you for a loop.
That's 2011, but it still hasn't aged well.
Yeah. But the thing is funny, though, is I still feel like of my listen, and I don't want you to get mad, Joe, but of my listen, this was not the worst Korn album I listened to when I marathon them. I would say Korn 3 was the worst one.
I fundamentally disagree.
Well, like,
That's
so
fine,
when I was talking to Lorin on Facebook this week, it was definitely like I was cleaning my basement, And so I was reorganizing all my CDs, like alphabetizing and making sure every CD, every disc was in the case and all that. And that took me 6 fucking hours.
And it'll take some time.
Yeah. You know, it's really weird. You don't like pay attention to how many CDs you have, but whenever you have them all right there in like cardboard boxes that you've taken out of a storage unit and stuff, and you're like, God damn, like this is where all my money's gone. But it's one of those like weird revelations. So I listened to the Path of Totality while I was cleaning, and which is funny because I hadn't been. I was listening to just like murder podcasts, like true crime podcasts and stuff all morning, and then I started talking to Lorin, and I was like, oh fuck, he's listening to the Path of Totality. I should probably listen to that too. So I popped it in, and oh man, like I definitely didn't hate the Wubs as much as I thought I was gonna hate them, but I didn't love the record. I didn't feel like the songs were redeemable. Like, why am I not just listening to Skrillex at this point?
Right.
Skrillex featuring John Davis. Because that essentially is what a majority of the tracks are. And yeah, the rape stuff definitely caught me by surprise, because for some reason, like when we did our first discography discussion, I don't think any of us actually listened to the record. And that's our bad. It was the early days. I'm sorry. But like I listened to it and I didn't have a lot of hate, and maybe it's just because I was like cleaning all day and I didn't have a lot of hate in my heart or whatever. But right. Like it definitely, I could hear a band that was just trying to figure out where they still stand in all of this.
Yeah.
Because let's take a little bit of a sidetrack here and talk about where heavy music is in 2018, or talk about where heavy music is in 2011. Okay, Korn hasn't been for a while. They haven't been like the band that you go to for heavy music. They were that in the mid to late 90s, and even like pre-2001, maybe even 2002. I'll give them that. 2002, 2003. They were still kind of the band that everybody more or less respected. However, during that time, you had other styles of heavy music come to the forefront. Metalcore was rising. You know, and you know, next week we're going to be talking about As I Lay Dying, which was one of the biggest metalcore bands out there. And I think it's just one of those things where Korn, because I remember hearing Take a Look in the Mirror and thinking, wow, they kind of stepped up the heaviness on this a little bit. They weren't playing like a different style, but they turned everything they did up to 11. It almost like on that record they were like unabashedly new metal. Like they were like, no, this is still viable. You know, this is still good. And it's weird though that like they realized that no, everybody's listening to Lamb of God, everybody's listening to As I Lay Dying, everybody's listening to Killswitch Engage, you know, bands like that. So Korn kind of went in a different direction with it. They were like, well, we still want to be relevant, so you get a record like See You on the Other Side, which is more of a pop record. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And I feel like by this point in 2011, they were like, okay, how do we show people that we're still cool? Or that we know, that we understand that nu metal is not the future.
Right.
So that's how you get a record like The Path of Totality, where they're like, look, it's dubstep. It's still aggressive. It's still Korn, but it's not really. The thing is that critically, I remember like the Onion AV Club gave it an F. Oh, geez.
But then across the board, all these other metal magazines liked it, and then they won. I think it was Kerrang's like Album of the Year.
Was it? I thought it was Rolling Stone.
No, it wasn't Rolling Stone.
Rolling Stone gave him good credit, but.
You know what? I want to say it was Kerrang or Revolver. Maybe it was Revolver.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it had more good reviews than I remembered at the time. And it was number 1 on Decibel Magazine's Top 40 Extreme Albums of 2011. Sputnik Music gave it 4.5 out of 5.
Which blows my mind.
All Music 4 out of 5. The Quietus, which is a very critical British music website, liked it. So
interesting.
That's kind of stunning.
It was different.
I understand why a English magazine would give
Oh wait,
them
you know
that.
what? Throw that all out the window. That was a different band's Path of Totality. I clicked the wrong one.
Oh,
Hold on.
So it's
That
not
made
even
no
an original album title?
Rewind.
Apparently it's some band called Tombs. I don't know. I clicked the one and it sent me to that one. All right. You know what? Okay, so some of those still stand. All Music gave it 4 out of 5 as well. Sputnik. Oh, I take that. Sputnik Music gave it a 0.5 out of 5. So that's a pretty low review. But Metal Hammer gave it 8 out of 10.
Wow.
Artist Direct 5 out of 5. Spin 7 out of 10. That's surprising.
Yeah.
So, but something called No Ripcord 1 out of 10.
Did the Metal Observer give it a review?
I'm sorry, who was that?
The Metal Observer?
That is not listed on the wiki.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, it was they won Album of the Year for the Revolver Golden Gods Award.
Wow.
So, yep.
I'm only asking about the Metal Observer because me and Joe's album, we got a 2 out of 10 from the Metal Observer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey,
Bring it.
all press is good press, bro.
Absolutely. That's why I drove down here in my Cadillac. But yeah, but yeah, no, it's interesting that this record was so well. And do you think that part of that though, by 2011 was a little bit corrupt? I've always wondered that about music journalism, in the sense that there's a lot of bands that we've talked about, and I'll say this pretty often when we talk about a record that we didn't personally like. I always ask, can you find a bad review for this record?
Well, that's a tough thing because you have basically there's no real market for bad reviews anymore because no one cares. If you're a big fan, then you're going to just say that a person's a hater. And the other question is what's to gain from a negative review? Because now people are saying so Pitchfork's last big slam was they gave the Ed Sheeran record a 2.0 or something like that. And everyone's why even do it? He's such a big artist. He doesn't even need a review. Why did you do that? And now what you're kind of at is all these reviews are 3 stars, 3.5 stars. It's
right.
A B. It's fine. So I almost look at any sort of negative or leans negative review to be sort of refreshing in a way. So even though people are why did they do this Ed Sheeran review? I'm it seems to be coming from a more honest place than, just giving it a 5 or something. I mean, the big one right now is the Jack White record that just came out. Very polarizing record. Have you guys heard it?
I have heard it, yeah.
What did you think?
I see that's what's weird. If you ask me for a review, I would say absolutely middle of the road.
I went into it bracing myself for a real wreck, and I thought it was fine. I thought it was basically in line with his other 2 solo records.
It was surprising.
Yeah. I mean, people are talking about this thing it's Metal Machine music, and I'm nah, it's just got some boring songs, but it's got some rippers, and it's just all of his other solo. I mean, that's the thing. All of his post-White Stripes stuff is you got a couple rippers, some boring tracks, and then it's over, because they're usually pretty short. Thank you, Mr. White.
I wouldn't say that I was on a level of impressed, because as I spoke earlier, apparently I'm not even impressed by Dimebag Darrell. But the thing is that dude, seriously, go listen to some technical death metal and let me know. But the thing is that I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because I usually come into stuff there's a certain sense of us doing this show and everything that we only listen to metal and then we're always hardcore all the time, which couldn't be further from the truth, but it's one of those things where I would listen to a record like a Jack White record, and everybody's impression of me would be that he's gonna shit on it, but I actually found it pretty enjoyable overall. I didn't think it was genre breaking. Or,
No.
it's like something's got to blow my fucking mind for me to give it a 5 out of 5.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, I found it enjoyable. And I think part of that too goes into the whole Korn thing, and that like by 2011, you don't really have like it's stupid to be like, I don't like Korn. Yeah, dude, we get it. You listen to super aggressive shit. We get it. So I think the Path of Totality succeeded in the sense that it was a different sounding Korn, and you could say, oh well, I really appreciated that, even though I don't. Like when I listen to this record, I just don't hear good songs. I don't hear anything that I'm like that gets stuck in my head. I don't hear anything that I'm like, oh okay, I'm gonna listen to that again, or like because some albums aren't great, so you just like pull the bad songs out and you just make a playlist of the good songs. And it really wasn't that way with the Path of Totality. I just couldn't get behind. I didn't feel like the dubstep sound was compatible with the Korn sound like they thought it would be. And it just sounds like Skrillex featuring John Davis from Korn.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you go and listen to just his solo stuff, Skrillex's solo stuff. I mean, Rock and Roll, was it Rock and Roll Will Take You Down the Mountain, that song? I mean, that's heavier than like basically anything on Path of Totality. So
right.
I guess that's all I have to say about that record.
So let's talk about the paradigm shift, because that one seems to be a little bit of a point of contention for some people.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really enjoyed the paradigm shift when it came out because I didn't know about the Serenity of Suffering. If that makes sense, like that was the new Korn album, Head's back.
Mm-hmm.
And that is readily apparent. And so what I hear on that record, and I feel like I speak for a lot of Korn fans when I say that like that record almost sounds like a continuation of what we had on Untouchables. It's not anywhere as good as Untouchables, but it is kind of that idea of like let's return back to the sound. Let's keep growing that sound that we established on Untouchables, that we established on Issues, that was kind of like the more quote-unquote mature Korn sound. And I think the only issue with it that really I had was that they were so used to being a hits band at that point that they felt like they had to try to make every song have a catchy hook or have a, some sort of like repetitive song structure to it. And so that record is kind of weird in the sense that it is absolutely returned to what Korn should sound like, but it's not. It's no Follow the Leader. It's no Issues. It can't compete with the records that it kind of vaguely sounds like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with those records as they went on, was that, more attention being paid to hooks and melody and things like that. That's what Untouchables is. It just happens to have like this huge sound. When Paradigm Shift came out for me, where I was, I'm trying to think of what I was listening to at the time in my life, but I remember hearing it and hating it. Like my immediate instinct was, what the fuck happened to this band? Even with Head back, I'm not on board with this. And I think I listened to it once, found it to be like a real whiff, and just filed it away and never listened to it until I was given the call to come in here. So yeah, on my re-listen, I liked it a lot more. I still think it's like figuring things out. It still has a couple wubby, dubstep moments. I feel like Never Never would be way better if they just remove that completely and just let it be the song that it is. I think that's got a really good hook. That record, it's not a bad record. It heads back, so that's cool. But it feels like a regrouping, but they're not quite there yet.
It's a, hey guys, I'm back.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, well, we've got 10 years worth of not working with you to work through. And because it's funny when you listen to the stuff that Head did by himself, it kind of has the same impression as Paradigm Shift.
Oh yeah, the Love and Death record has a lot of similarities. Absolutely.
Yeah, like you want to like it, but at the same time, it doesn't sound exactly like Korn. It's weird though that Brian Head Welch sings like John Davis. Did anybody else find that kind of weird that like his vocal delivery was very much in line with what John Davis would have done in that same situation?
I mean, you hang out with people, steal from the best.
He has gone on record saying that John Davis is his favorite rock singer. So it makes sense that he would emulate that. You
have to say that. He sees him every day at work.
Right. He didn't then, though, when he made the, that's the interesting thing, and I'm gonna not keep this like too long, but like, it's weird how he exited the band for the reasons he exited the band for, and like him becoming like more of like a religious figure, and it being this big revelation that he had. I thought it was interesting that through all of this, like he wrote a book, which I read, called Saving for Myself, which is about his drug addiction in the band. And everybody, like when he released that book, everybody thought that it was like shit talking Korn. But like if you read the book, he's like, Korn's the greatest fucking band in the entire world, and I love them so much, and I'm sorry that I couldn't continue with them, but I had all these personal issues,
right.
And I think that they're great, and I want them to be successful, and all this stuff. And so it's interesting how like he was always, even when he was away from the band, still a massive fan of the band and still really into what they did. So when he released his own records, we're all sitting there as fans being like, this is where the Korn sound went. But like not all Korn fans are going to be on board with Christian rock.
Right.
So it was definitely one of those like really great moments in rock history where inevitably, because the band sounds so similar, they started getting booked at the same events, the same venues and stuff.
Right.
And it didn't take long for the guys in Korn to be like, hey, Head, man, come out and play Blind with us. Come out and play a song. And then it's like, 2 months later, he's like, okay, I'm back in the band. know.
Well, I mean, his leaving is different than a lot of other people leaving bands. It's not it wasn't a money thing. It wasn't a lady involved. That can cause a lot of problems that never get fixed. And the other thing is, let's point it out. As much as they might have tried to downplay and say whatever when he first left, they never replaced him. So it was like, we are ready for when you return. And so, and then I think Monkey's the one who really said it. He's like, I miss this guy. I needed this guy. He's my partner. Now, the thing that we haven't really talked about too much. So Paradigm Shift was produced by Don Gilmore.
Yes.
Who did most famously the first Linkin Park record. And I think that's why it still has this sort of like electronic sound, but not really like band sound totally. And then when you get to Serenity of Suffering, and I'm gonna slaughter this guy's name, Nick Raskulinix, I want to say.
Not bad.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Still probably wrong. I'll just call him Nick. That'll be easier. He did Deftones Diamond Eyes, I want to say. And I don't know if you guys ever saw that video. I think I might have mentioned it on our show once, but there's a video of him in the studio with Korn recording Serenity of Suffering. And he's like a normal dude, like just like, hey, you're going to do this awesome thing, and then you're going to do this awesome thing, and then it's just going to get super awesome. And you're like, this is the guy you need in the booth with you. This is the guy you need who just wants you to be the best thing you can be. And that, I think, is why Serenity of Suffering feels like such a triumph for this band, is that it's just like, let's make a huge Korn record. And I think that's really like the key. I think they need to, whenever they make their next Korn record, which I'm sure they will. I think they'll keep making Korn records until one of them dies. They just need to keep working with a producer like that. I mean, I don't know if they're interested in going back and working with them again. But I think the results speak for themselves on that one.
Do you think Korn 3 would have been a better product, a better release, a better example of remember who you are if Head was still in the band?
I think it's an impossible thing because I don't think health-wise he was where he needed to be as a person. to make that record. But I mean, if we were to presume that he's like a healthy guy and they make it, maybe, but still, I think a big part of it is Jonathan Davis. And I think a big part of it also is that Ross's style is such that they could not get there as adult men. Like, you know, he's a producer that thrives on youth and energy and everything. And at that point, I mean, yeah, when they made those first two Korn records, they're just a bunch of guys who probably living all in the same place, and they all spend time together in the van all the time, going from gig to gig. By the time they made Korn 3, I mean, that's we take our own jets situation. Not to say they have private jets, but you know what I mean? Like, they're, you know, doing things separately. They're just like, you know, Korn Inc. at that point. And it's tough. And I think they've even said that in interviews, that it's tough to get back to that. Actually, Jonathan Davis did this interview a couple years ago with the Noisy blog, where he ranked all the band's records and from worst to best. And when talking about Korn 3, he said it was really fucking hard. It was rough. We had Ross come back in, and he tortured the shit out of me, and I love him, and that's definitely how he does his thing. It's a very weird album to make, and it was a very painful album to make, where he'd do a lot of fucked up shit. We did the album on tape and dumped it on Pro Tools, and we only did tape edits. It was a return to doing it the old school style and not having any boundaries or a click track, but I think it was forced, and Ross pushed us to do stuff that I was older than. It seemed pointless to try and recapture shit from 94 and 09. It didn't transfer, even though we did well, and the record was great. Okay, kind of walks it back a little bit. Yeah, Ross took it to a crazy level I wasn't comfortable with. So yeah, basically, yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if they had tried to make a throwback record, and instead of getting Ross, maybe gotten somebody like Terry Date or something like that, maybe they would have had something. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, why do you make a record like a Back to Basics record? Is when you've hit a wall, you know, and you feel like that's the only thing you could do. So I mean, I don't think there's any way they don't make that record, you know, especially with Head being gone.
Do you think that's what Take a Look in the Mirror was, though? Because like I've been curious about that record.
Take a Look in the Mirror for me seemed like, because of how huge and expensive Untouchables was, and the fact that Untouchables was supposed to be a world beater, and instead, I think it was like I think they had what? They were coming off of 2 number ones at that point. Like Follow the Leader had been a number 1 record, and Issues was a number 1 record. And then they're off 3 years. They come back. They're supposed to be the big band. I think they're coming off a big contract too. And that record does okay. It sells 1 million, but only 1 million. And you're looking at there's sort of like, well, we made the huge record with big pop hooks and you know, these waves of sound. What do we do? And it's like, let's produce ourselves. Let's get real raw with it. And the thing is that even though I think Take a Look in the Mirror isn't their strongest record, it still has 3 of their best songs on it. Oh no, 2 of their best songs. Because I would say Right Now and that Tomb Raider one. Why am I blanking on it? What's that? Did My Time.
Did My Time, yep.
Great songs. And they sound, I mean, the first time I heard Did My Time, I was like, Korn? Really? Like they, you know, because it had that sort of thin guitar up top and then it drops in real heavy. I mean, I think those 2 songs are great. They still, both of those songs still get regular play when you see them in concert because they crush. So for me, I don't know. I think that record succeeds more than it fails. I mean, I think the Naas song on that is really good actually, because I think that's
not Matt Naas.
Yeah, not Matt Naas, the rapper Naas. Yeah, it's funny when I especially when I did my re-listen for this, I was like struck by like, you know, this is like a real good merging of rap and rock. Like a legit good merging. Like Nas gets to really be Nas on this track, and Korn still gets to be Korn, and they make it work because a lot of the times that's the problem, is that one will take a back seat to the other. Either it's very rappy and the rocking is kind of or it rocks really heavy and they can't really rap. It's too aggressive and they get lost in it. There's nothing for them to really grab a hold to. And yeah, I listen to something like that Naas track and I think, oh no, they pulled it off with this one.
Yeah, for sure. I listened to that on repeat on the way down here. I got shit canned from my job like 2 weeks ago, so that song is right in the pocket, as far as that stuff goes. Yeah. But I agree with you 100%. Like that was the moment on the record that to me sounded like the old Korn. Like that. Yeah. That track is not something that would have been out of place on Follow the Leader.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is reading a lot of reviews and stuff. A lot of critics pointed out that basically after Follow the Leader, they abandoned like any sort of rap, hip hop, funk sounds like almost immediately. Issues doesn't have it. Untouchables doesn't have it. And then you get this rap song on Take a Look in the Mirror, and you're like, oh, okay. They still want to do it sometimes.
In 2003, no less.
Yeah.
When it's not like really cool to do that.
Yeah. On this noisy list where Jonathan Davis ranked the albums from worst to best, he has at the time when they did it, they only had 11 records. But he put Take a Look in the Mirror as the worst, and apparently Head has also said that it's the worst record, which is interesting.
That was part of why Head left, was that he just felt like that record wasn't representative of what Korn could do. And my understanding is he was like completely drugged out during the recording of that. So it kind of makes sense why the songs were a little bit more simple. Yeah. Because the songs on Untouchables were really complex for Korn.
Oh yeah, they're trying to do stuff with keyboards and synths and just trying different things. I mean, that's an album that the British press loved because they felt that they heard a lot of 80s pop sounds in it, like Duran Duran and stuff like that, which always blew my mind about how much they love that record. My thing with Untouchables is that I think the sequencing is all off. I think a lot of the songs that are early on should be later. The fact that I think it's like Beat It Up Right is like track like 11 or something like that. Way too late in the song.
It's not on the censored version, which unfortunately is the version I have.
Oh.
Because my parents weren't down with that when it came out.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, you've got like Make Believe, Hollow Life, these like slower tracks way up front. And then you got Wake Up Hate, Beat It Up Right, and Embrace, like, and One More Time, like later in the track. And it's just, a lot of it just feels very unusual. I would totally flip it around if I could.
They should have been on the front of the album because those are the most driving songs. The people that fans of Follow the Leader and Issues would have been more on board with. Because I remember Untouchables being a really weird experience for me, even though I had the version that didn't have Beat It Up Right on it. I remember it being kind of one of those, like I remember I was at a girlfriend's house and I was showing her this record and she wasn't impressed. But it was one of those like, I was like, check this out. This is really, this is the next evolution of Korn, Like yeah. I had drank the Kool-Aid at that point and, was like, this is the best. This is great. Because I think I even said on our original Korn episode that Issues is my favorite, but Untouchables is a better record. Wow. And I still stick by that in the sense that I think that there was more thought put into all of it. But like you said, the sequencing is kind of off. Like I listen to that record in an alternate order whenever I'm listening to it on on Google Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to. The great thing about those platforms is that you can rearrange a record to be whatever you want it to be. And what I love about Untouchables though was just the atmosphere and just the brazenness to write a song like I can't remember the name of the song. That slower one where he's like, now I see the times they change. What was that song called?
Oh, Alone I Break.
Alone I Break. Yeah, like that. I thought that song was really ballsy for Korn because they hadn't really done anything that was that emotional. I mean, they had always been emotional. John Davis had always,
That's like a ballad, though.
That's
right.
The one and only Korn ballad.
And it was like what you guys talked about on the Mudvayne record of, World So Cold, that was kind of a weird, because those records came out relatively around the same time. think.
I think so.
And so it was interesting hearing, because I'm listening to this Korn record, and then on the other hand, I'm listening to this Mudvayne record, and I thought it was interesting hearing bands like that really explore their more melodic side, but it not be like this like trite thing where they weren't writing a song about like this bitch that they love, or like this they weren't being weird about it. Like, it was just really intense type of song. And Alone I Break is one of my favorites. Hating is one of my favorites, and I like those songs because I feel like John Davis was a little bit more emotionally vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So I think that going into Untouchables with that feeling, it was really disheartening for me to go into Take a Look in the Mirror, which was more of like I'm a tough guy, I'm gonna beat your ass,
right.
Because that's one of the things that we talk about on the show all the time. Is I'm not a really big fan of like tough guy mentality in metal.
You don't want to fuck some shit up, Dan?
I don't. I just don't. And that's the whole thing, is like I appreciate the emotion. I appreciate the screams, with like gut-wrenching emotions and lyrics that matter. And real feelings being displayed, even if I don't necessarily agree with what's being said. I can still get behind the emotion that led that person to that place. So like, you look at a song like Hating, which is about like hating humanity, that you have gone from being the victim to being the kind of person that kind of like participates in that type of evil. And he talks about like how he's been hating all this time, and that like he's more or less become the monster that he has vowed to hate or to be against. Mm-hmm. Like that's a really powerful thought. And then a year later, it's like, I'm gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna, like through your face, my fist will plow. Watching as your blood runs out. Let's do this now.
Well, I mean, the other thing to think about is that we're leaving that nu metal era of, inward ennui. We're getting into more of a butt rocky sound. I mean, it's funny, and it's not even a song I think about that often, but I always think about the first Drowning Pool song they put out after they got a new lead singer the first time. It's called like Step Up, and it's literally just like, you better fucking step up. And I was like, what is this shit? It's like laughable. So yeah, I think it was just the era at the time. My thing with Untouchables is that it's incredibly long. 65 minutes long. Way too long.
It's not respectful of your time.
It is not respectful of my time. And let me tell you, I remember when it came out thinking like, this is a real long record. And yeah, listening to it for this show, I was just like, Jesus, this record. And some of these, that's the thing. You cannot, they just figure out how to make these songs tighter, because that's the thing. They get tighter and tighter, because on this record, Hating's 5 minutes, 10 seconds long. Embrace is 4.5, even Here to Stay is 4:31.
That's the opening track.
Opening track. So
should be 3 minutes. They could have carved some of those choruses out of there. Yeah.
I think a couple. Yeah. So, that's kind of the other thing I like about, which we've kind of talked about a little bit. Issues. The thing I love about Issues is that it's 53:16, but a lot of that is just if you carve out the extra snow static sounds at the end of the album, it's just shy of 50 minutes. So that one's just the right length. Now, you said this is your core. Issues is your favorite.
Issues is my absolute favorite, and I think it's the combination of atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Korn was trying to establish atmosphere on Follow the Leader, and they did that with all their extra guitar effects and all of that. But like the thing about Follow the Leader is that, yes, it's emotional, it's crazy, it's great, it's their breakthrough. John Davis can sing, the guitars sound better, drums sound better, everything sounds better, sounds bigger, sounds more okay, so big's the only word I can come up with on that. But like Follow the Leader was such an impactful record, but it still has songs like All in the Family on it. and it still has that earache in my eye cover at the end.
Right.
And it's just really kind of like, are you guys taking this shit seriously or are you not? And on issues, they take that shit seriously.
Well, they had Brendan O'Brien producing, who, you know, his track record of all the really great Pearl Jam albums. He's, I think he's Springsteen's producer now. I think like Springsteen does anything. He works with Brendan O'Brien. Brendan O'Brien did Evil Empire and Battle of Los Angeles, Rage Against the Machine albums. So, I mean, he's got, in my book, you know, free pass for life.
He's put out some perfect records. Absolutely.
And so, you know, and then they even said that Brendan O'Brien came in and was like, you guys need to be focused. We're not going to be fooling around. Let's get this record done. And on top of that, this is a very personal record for Jonathan Davis, because I feel like this album is all about basically him dealing with being a famous person, but also like with the band, you know, and how like them getting crazy could destroy the whole thing. So he's still speaking, you know, even though if it's not as specific, you still can tell that this is basically just him speaking to the band. But yeah, I mean, this record's killer, you know, Falling Away From Me, Make Me Bad. Let's Get This Party Started. And then Dirty. I mean, Dirty is one of my like all time favorite Korn songs.
Let's Get This Party Started. That is my favorite Korn song.
Well, there you go.
And it's interesting in the sense that, like, as far as musical growth for me goes, like music and heaviness, my biggest platform has always been that the issue that people have from moving from like new metal to metalcore, death metal, black metal, all these really extreme styles, has always been the vocals. This weird combination, like, when you have vocals that basically sound inhuman. And John Davis has approached that before with the scatting vocals and the really growly, throaty type vocals.
Yeah.
Let's Get This Party Started was a song where he delivered in a manner that was much more growly than he had ever delivered before that. And so it was one of my first exposures, because I mean, yeah, I'd heard Twist before that, and I'd heard, you know, Freak on a Leash and like all these weird scatty stuff that he'd done, but that was all nonsense. That wasn't like real lyrics being delivered. And so when I heard this party, Let's Get This Party Started, it was like, there's a part where he's just like, you make me feel inside. Like, it was very throaty and very otherworldly, very inhuman, and a lot of people didn't like that, but I was like, well, this is taking the emotion 10 steps further than what it was before, where you've gone beyond the human being and you've become this otherworldly kind of thing. And I loved that. And I don't know if that was produced via some type of vocal effects or what they used, because I think there were a lot of effects used on that record, but like, that really opened me up. There was this band called Zao that I'd heard of before. Zao. And
you're wearing their shirt.
I love them.
Every time we record.
I love them. They're my favorite band. But the thing is that like their vocalist, his name's coincidentally also Dan. He delivered in that style only. Like, he only did the raspy, growling, serpentine type of vocal. But like, and it's hard for me to admit on a podcast, because we try to make people think that we're like super metal or whatever. But like, if it wasn't for a song like Let's Get This Party Started and some of the vocals that were on there, I wouldn't be the appreciator of next level stuff like that I became. And like, that song just means so much to me, in that like, it's emotional, the lyrics sound sincere, and it's about a personal struggle, you know, and like, my interpretation of it was like the personal struggle between the man that you are and the man that you want to be. And like, that song just, I mean, it definitely hits me on an emotional level, and I don't think that I could say that it was my favorite Korn album without that song. Like, it was very, very instrumental in my appreciation of heavier music, And nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to say, oh, yeah, I got into heavy music because I listened to Korn. But, that's where we're at. Like, that really, it was a really good gateway for me. And I don't know if it was a gateway for other people, but this record, absolutely. Like, let's get this party started. And then there was another song after that. And I keep wanting to say it's called Hating, but I know that's not.
You talking about Counting?
It's not Counting. Is it Counting or is it?
Well, let's get this party started is track 13 of 16. So after that, you got Wish You Could Be Me, Counting, and Dirty.
I think it might be No Way.
Oh, which is right before Let's Get This Party Started.
Right. And again, I've got the track listing changed.
Let me ask you, when you were listening, I mean, this can be every Korn album or, this one, was there any song that you had not previously considered and then on hearing it for this was like, oh, well, that's kind of a pleasant surprise I never thought of before?
For this listen?
Yeah.
And it's weird because the song is, again, off of Issues. It's Somebody Someone. Which is weird because it's a single.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a song that everyone's heard. But I remember that also being one of those, like, holy shit moments where you were like, okay, so Korn has become a popular band. They've become the band that is known for, taking, traditional rock and making it heavier and making it more extreme. But like Somebody Someway, what shit, I messed that up. Somebody Someone was a song that was uncompromisingly heavy, and it sounded like something that they may have written a few years prior, but had just kind of updated it with the atmosphere and the sound to fit kind of the more modern Korn sound. But I remember that song being like, holy shit, so we're already this far into the career, but they're not afraid to write a heavy song like this. Like, it'd be this like really extreme, because I remember years ago, before, because I was raised in a pretty religious household, so we didn't really listen to a lot of people give us criticism on the show that we talk about a lot of Christian bands, because that's what I was exposed to the most as a young person.
Go with what you know, man.
Right. And so, but I remember my sister was like not like on the best terms with my parents for a while, so like I would drive around with my sister and we would listen to like Korn songs and Limp Bizkit songs and stuff that I couldn't listen to at home. And I remember my sister being like, oh god, I heard this new Korn single, Somebody Someone, and it sucks. She was like, I hate it. Come
on, sis.
I know. I was like, damn. Okay, well, let's hear it, because I'd liked the Korn song she showed me before. She showed me Dead Bodies Everywhere, which is the second place contender for your question. If Somebody Someone wasn't a song, I would have gone with Dead Bodies Everywhere. And it'd be like, I remember liking those songs, like Freak on a Leash, Dead Bodies Everywhere. Like a lot of the stuff that was on Follow the Leader, I really liked. And she showed me this Somebody Someone, and I was like, well, what's wrong with this song? And she's like, I don't know. It's just that like it doesn't seem human. It doesn't sound like something that I can relate to. And I was like, oh, well, I'm only like 13 or whatever, but I'm like, I can relate to this in a huge way, because I don't know if it's just because I'm a male or because there's a certain testosterone factor to heavy songs or what it was. But that song really, whenever I listened to it again, because I listened to it, I liked it and everything. And then whenever we came back for this listen, I didn't listen to Issues very much when we did the first episode because I knew it already.
Right.
But whenever I listened to it again for this listen, I was like really surprised at how kind of more or less soft Issues is. But it kind of like it hits this peak on Somebody Someone where it's like, hey, just so you know, we're still Korn, and we're still like a badass mosh pit kind of band.
Yeah.
And so I found that really pleasant and surprising.
The song for me that was what I hadn't thought about before was Hey Daddy. Okay. Which I was like, oh, this song's pretty killer. This is catching me. So that was yeah. It has I think that beginning I was like, okay, but then once it gets going, it's a rocker. It's pretty good. But yeah, my favorite song on this album is Dirty. Always has been, always will be. It's the last Korn song on an album that is good. Before that, they're all kind of skippable. And this was one where they go out real strong. And I didn't realize that he was saying, was it like you dirty little fuck or something like that?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's what he was saying. So I played this song on my college radio station like all 4 years. Had no idea. And no one ever stopped me because I don't think nobody
said anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny that you say that because I used to do a Christian radio show, like a Christian rock radio show. And I used to just throw songs in there that weren't. Like of that, and it's funny because nobody said anything because I would play Korn songs and I think at one point I played Limp Bizkit and somebody called me and was like, hey, is this? And I was like, oh no, they just sound like Limp Bizkit. Yeah. That's just funny to hear you say that. Yeah, it's so funny whenever the words aren't super distinguishable. Yeah. Like, I mean, look at Disturbed. Stupefy was the very first single that ever came out with Disturbed, and that's the first time I ever heard the word fuck on the radio, wow. Because they didn't know to edit that because I remember me and Joe would go back and forth when we were in high school, like he's just growling, he's not saying anything, but I was like, I'm pretty sure he's saying fuck. Like it's just, I wasn't like well versed in extreme vocals at that time, but like I was like, I'm pretty sure he's saying fuck like a bunch of times. and they're like, no, it's got to be. And then I think now if you hear that song on the radio, I think it's all edited. But like back then, it was kind of this weird time where you could get away with that kind of stuff.
I'm going to go retro on this one. Hey, Dan, you want to go get some lunch?
Sweet. Yeah, like that. Yeah, Disturbed.
Just a noise.
We got to do a Disturbed episode sometime.
You do.
We're not trying to be like that podcast that only does new metal because that exists already. But well, it's weird though because like and Joe, leave this in the show. I'm gonna be pissed off if you cut this out. But like the thing is that like whenever I heard Roach, like before I heard Roach Koach, our goal was like, we're only going to cover bands that are in what traditional metalheads would say is real metal. So then that lasted like what, Joe, 4 episodes? And then I was like, we got to talk about Korn, at some point. And like, it wasn't until we did the new metal episode with Toomey that we were like, that we kind of started opening up to like, you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to talk about whatever we think is good and move on from that. Because our goal hasn't been to be negative necessarily, but just to be critical, you know. So like, the band, we might like the band, but we may not like everything that they put out. So, with something like Korn, that was kind of a revelation of like, hey, wait a minute, it's our show, we can do whatever the hell we want. And I think and I remember finding that really interesting because I was like, shit, when we were going to talk to Toomey about new metal for 2 hours or however long it ended up being, I remember thinking like, shit, I don't want to just listen to new metal for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and so I just started listening to episodes of Roach Koach. Just like I was like, they're gonna do the work for me.
We do.
And then I just
we do the work.
Dude, you guys have listened to some shit.
You say all of that like we're not about to do a thing called New Metal May.
We are going to do New Metal May, and it's totally ripping off. But it's one of those things where we just have to do it. I really enjoyed the Mudvayne episode to the point of later on in the episode, whenever I heard the End of All Things to Come episode, I was like, shit. So I actually went to a local CD warehouse, and this is fucked up because I had just lost my job, but I had just done my taxes, so it kind of worked out. I ended up picking up the End of All Things to Come, and I've been listening to nothing but that for probably the past three weeks or so.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, but anyway, sorry, we probably should bring this back to Korn at some point, but yeah, I don't even remember where we were going with that, but it's you won't hear it whenever you listen to this back. But the thing is that like with Korn, I think that they were, like I commented very heavily on your episode on Demon Hunter, I think Korn is like the perfect introductory band for a lot of people into like that liked mainstream music. I think a lot of people that listen to heavy music now were introduced to heavy music via bands like Korn.
Yeah.
Or via bands like Limp Bizkit or Disturbed, or and all those bands can kind of be considered. I mean, the jury's out on Limp Bizkit, but as far as bands like Disturbed and bands that came after Korn rose to popularity, a lot of that can be contributed to them, which is why I thought it was interesting, because we were talking about like how like the misogynist lyrics. Misogynist, that's the word.
Yeah.
Misogynist lyrics and to talk about rape and the being the aggressor, but then also being the victim, being par for the course for nu metal. Isn't Korn in a lot of ways responsible for that? In the sense that they were the ones that made it okay.
They set the template, so it's I mean, if you want to do the whole it's their fault, I mean, the thing is that it's what they built off of, and because they were the first, it's a gift and a curse. I mean, that's part of the reason that they're still one of the big bands, because that's the thing. They can still headline a lot of places, even though they haven't had like a really big record since 2002.
They haven't charted in a while, yeah.
I mean, well, here's the thing. I went through, and I was actually surprised to find, even though I don't think they've had a platinum record since, I think Take a Look in the Mirror was the last one that was platinum. But let me find it here. I'm pretty sure Serenity of Suffering charted at 5. So like, so I mean, like they still were charting. Let me see. Korn.
Did Twisted Transistor not succeed as a single?
Take a Look in the Mirror was platinum. Oh, See on the Other Side was platinum. That charted at 3. Untitled was gold. That debuted at 2. Korn 3 debuted at 2. Path of Totality was 10. Paradigm Shift was 8. Serenity of Suffering came in at 4. So they come in strong. So actually the lowest, not counting the original Korn, which peaked at 72. Their lowest charting was Path of Totality at 10. So if a Korn record comes out, it's going to have like at least a big first week, and it'll show up. So
everybody wants to check it out, even if it's a train wreck.
Right.
They want to see.
Yeah. And I'd say besides Path of Totality, I mean, basically 2010, 2011, 2007. So like 2007 to like 2011 was the rough run for them, I'd say. Untitled, Korn 3, Path of Totality.
I think Untitled is actually a sleeper. It's a really good record if you listen to it for what it is, because it's the only record that, yes, it's the lead singer, the guitarist, the bass player hanging out in the studio, but they were hanging out in the studio with Terry Bozzio. And they wrote some really entertaining shit. There's Killing, there's Hushabye for all of its faults. I Will
Evolution.
Protect You is terrible, but it has an amazing solo by Terry. You mentioned Evolution. I know Starting Over, John Davis wrote that in his home studio. The songs were good. The only thing that really lacked was the fact that I knew for certain I wasn't going to see this shit live. Because you can't do that shit. You can't take Terry Bozzio on the road unless you've got 3 days to move him around.
Well, I guess the thing with Terry Bozzio on this record is that he basically tried to impose himself on the band.
Join the band, right?
And he said that he demanded to be a full member with 25% interest, and the band felt that was, quote, offensive, and they decided not to tour with Bozzio, so they toured with Joey Jordison.
Which is not a bad move.
No, not at all.
Wasn't that the year that Korn, Metallica, and Slipknot played a few shows together, and Joey was playing 3 sets? I remember very distinctly there was this point where Lars left the stage in his robe, and then Joey would sit down and play 5 or 6 songs.
The only show they show was this was part of the Bitch We Have a Problem tour. Great name.
Aged really well.
Perfectly. which was Korn with Hell Yeah, Droid, Five Finger Death Punch, and Flyleaf.
Wow.
And then when they were in Australia, it was Biohazard, Chimera, Throwdown, and Blood Simple.
That sounds a lot better.
Oh, there was a Family Values tour in 2007.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And that was Korn, Evanescence, Atreyu, Flyleaf, Hell Yeah, Trivium, and Neurosonic.
Weird mixture of metalcore and new metal.
Yeah, and then second stage is Droid, Five Finger Death Punch, In Vitro, Through You, Twin Method, Blood Simple, Egypt Central, The Vanished, OTEP, and The Last Starfighter.
OTEP.
I didn't make any of those up, but some of them sound made up. Yeah.
What's your band called? The Last Starfighter?
Last Starfighter?
Yeah.
We're Egypt Central.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, OTEP's the only one I heard that had any like credibility, you know, like it's interesting.
All right, Dan, we're calling the next band idea The Running Man.
The Running Man. Okay, let's do it. But yeah, I think it's interesting that like how Korn kind of survived through because like I don't think it's any mystery that I'm like kind of a metalcore guy. Like I you know that's the kind of music I played. That's the kind of music that really, you know, like we talked about with Let's Get This Party Started, how like that was kind of the pathway to me for like those more extreme bands. And it's weird hearing like throughout the 2000s how Korn, despite basically being known as a new metal band, and not only a new metal band, but like the pioneering band, you know, that brought this out of the forefront, how they kind of survived through that and played alongside of some of these bands. Because I mean, I know there was a period in my life where I disowned Korn. You know, I was like,
yeah,
I'm not into that stuff. That stuff's basically butt rock. I remember going on the record. I did an interview back in 2006 for my band at the time, and they were like, you know, how do you feel about, you know, music now versus music 10 years ago? And I said something along the lines of that, like bands like Korn, Disturbed, Marilyn Manson, stuff like that was all like basically pop music aimed at a demographic. and that a lot of the metal had been much more extreme than that as early as the like 1988, and that these bands that had come up later were just like mainstream interpretations of what heavy music should have been. It was a totally ass comment to make, and like really made me seem like a lot worse than I was, because that's the person I was then. And like I remember reading it back. Like, I read the interview once it published, and I was like, God, I came off like a total asshole on that. And, but I think it's interesting, you know, even now, all these years later, even though I've re-accepted Korn, I've re-accepted, you know, my influences, there's no reason to deny what you listened to when you were younger versus now, and all that. It helps you paint a much more clear picture of where music was, where it's gone, you know, where it's going to go. But I think it's interesting that Korn kind of survived through that, even though they didn't really have the mainstream support that they'd always had. I mean, I remember my buddy Josh, who was he was one of the original co-hosts on the show. He was on the Korn episode, and he had gone and seen Korn recently, and was like, they're just playing at a club. They weren't playing like a sold out venue. They're playing at a club. But he said the thing that was most interesting is he said John Davis seemed so much happier than he had seemed in the past decade of playing like the bigger venues and stuff, you know, with Head in the early days, you know. He's like, but whenever the band was back on, I think it was the Paradigm Shift tour that he had seen them on, he was like, they are back. They are aggressive. They are very much the band that they were. He goes, it's almost like I went back in time and saw them in 1997. You know, like right before Follow the Leader had come out, you know?
Yeah. So wait, have you guys seen Korn live?
Back in the late 90s, I was able to go to Family Values. So I got a piece of that Korn, Limp Bizkit, was actually when Rammstein came. So essentially, if you have the Family Values 98 CD, that's what I got to see live.
Nice.
2 times. I saw them in 2001. Don't tell my parents because they still don't know. And,
And they don't listen to the show.
The second time I saw them was in 2006.
Okay.
And it did not go well in 2006 because, like, in Korn in 2001, like, holy shit. Like, that was the prime time to see Korn. So whenever I saw them in 2006, it was like, okay, what is this band? You know, like they're not playing, like, they play. It's weird too because they played a lot of the hits. Because I remember they opened the show with Twist, which I thought was really interesting. And then they came back on and played Earache My Eye, which I thought was kind of weird. But they played, what was the last song they played? I think it was like My Gift to You.
Wow.
Which is just a really weird song to throw on there because it's not like it's their strongest song. But
no, not at all.
Not for a show closer.
No. I've seen them 3 times. I saw them on the Sick and Twisted tour in 2000 when they were touring Issues. It was them, Stained, Mindless Self-Indulgence. And that was a weird one because Stained kind of crushed it. And the Korn came out and they did okay. And then in the middle of their set, they took a break and Stained came out and did a Korn song. I believe they didn't need to. It was very unusual. I've never seen that before. Haven't seen it since.
Aaron Lewis actually handled. Okay.
Yeah, and then I saw them in I guess it was 2016 and last year 2017 when they were touring, and they were fucking great. They were better than when I saw them the first time. They just crushers, played everything you wanted to hear. I was very impressed. So, and
that was post Roach Koach, right? Because I remember you guys talking about the show. Yeah.
So we were deep in. Well, I think when we saw them the first time, we were like 10 episodes, 15 episodes in, and then when we saw them last summer, it was we're deep into the show.
Didn't people recognize you? Like, I mean, how cool is that?
It was. Let me tell you, Jenny. When we went the first time, we posted that we were going to be there. And Jenny's like, no one cares. And I was like, just throwing it out there. You know, people say they're local. And then, this gentleman, Dan, found us. And he pitched us on all these bands that we needed to do on the show. And it's because of him that we did a Primer 55 episode. And then the Primer 55 episode led to us meeting Mr. Josh Toomey.
The legendary Josh
Toomey. And it kind of all snowballed from there, you know? So it's all good. And then when we went and saw Korn the second time, we ran into that guy again. He had more recommendations. We're like, all right, dude, we'll do him. You're
Make
a guy.
us a list. Yeah.
So the mega list, which keeps on growing. So
I know, and I'm not doing too good at because it's frustrating that like now I've got that line to where I can just message you directly. It's one of those like, holy shit, I was listening to this. You need to check out that. And I know how frustrating that is as a podcaster.
Let me tell you, I'm not frustrated at all. We get emails and messages from people and they're like, don't want to bug you. I'm like, I'm not bugged. I'm not bugged, man. Let me know. But no, because we currently have, I just got it up here in front of me, 167 albums on the list to do. So
you're never gonna run out, man. You're gonna keep this going. You got the 5-year plan.
Oh man. Well, I think just one day somebody's gonna crack. Might be me, might be Jenny, might be Matt. One of us is just gonna hit a wall. That's why I think it's good that we take the breaks that we do, and that no one ever knows that we take them. But that we just figure it out, because otherwise, you go a little crazy with all this new metal all the time.
Joe does all the editing. We've never made that any secret. I always joke that because I've talked to other podcasters, they're like, man, it's just that it's so much work and it's so much this and it's so much that. And I'm like, man, that really sucks. I just show up and talk. I drink beer and talk, and that's my whole thing. But
if I can get him to move his nose away from the mic when he's not talking, I'll be a happy guy. I feel like I've completed something.
That's from years of training, because when we were in a band together, I had this problem very early on where I would scream, because that's all I did was scream, but it was one of those I would start with the mic all the way out here, and I'd scream, and then Joe would be like, no, you need to get up on that mic and like really like eat it. So then whenever we did the transition from playing music to doing podcasting, it was like, dude, you need to like get off that mic because I can hear you. I can hear your cholesterol heart breathing, through all that. And
it's like, dude, are you talking right now? No. Okay, move.
Well, we just recently did an episode. We did an episode with James Rolfe recently. He's the guy that basically back in 2004 started the whole, we're going to review video games on YouTube. I was watching one of his videos late one night when we were like 4 podcasts in, and I was looking at his DVD shelf, and it was like Black Sabbath, System of a Down, Rage Against the Machine, like all these bands, and I was like, I wonder if he would be interested in talking to somebody about not video games. And so I got a hold of him, and he immediately was like, yeah, dude, let's do it. So we had him on. But the interesting thing is Judas Priest just put out a new record, and he contacted us, I guess, a few weeks prior to that, and was like, they're putting out a new record, and their first show of their new tour is in my hometown, so I'm going to go see him. So he wanted to come on the show. And I think it was only then that like we realized we had to do the show, and then we had to edit it that night and then put it up that night. Because it was it was time sensitive. And we were like, holy shit. And like, so that was my first preview of like how much Joe actually does with these. Because I was like, I'll make the pot of coffee. I'll stay here. I'll help with the editing. And it was like me sitting there watching him taking like 35 minutes of my breathing out of the episode, and that just blew my mind.
I walk the line between a dynamic would solve my problem, but I love the sound of condensers because I'm a radio fan. So I either have to live with it, or I can put a dynamic in front of his face and I'll never hear it.
Right.
Can't decide. I go back and forth.
Well, I guess we should probably, because we definitely flew off of Korn, but let's let's wrap it back in with our final thoughts on Korn.
All right.
Okay.
Give me a song, Lorin.
Doesn't mean we have to stop talking, but
let me see. You know what? Let's listen. Let's put on Dirty, man.
All right.
Hot track.
Lorin Kozlowski, your final thoughts on Korn.
My final thoughts on Korn, going into this, or coming out of this, really, is that they're more consistent than I realized. Their fallow period was maybe not as deep as I once thought. I will never listen to all of their albums as this close together all at once, because they've got a lot of tricks that they do over and over again, and which is fine. That's their moves. But yeah, you basically just pick one and you're kind of getting the whole deal. If I were to pick my favorite out of this from doing the re-listen, I think it's still probably it's probably either Issues or Serenity of Suffering. Probably. Issues is just, I think it has the nostalgia factor for me, which I don't always like to lean on, but it's kind of inevitable. But also just the production's really strong. The songs are really there. It's basically front to back. Yeah. So overall, I think Korn's pretty good.
Dan, what about you?
I think the good outweighs the bad. And I said this back a year ago, but like, I don't think that Korn's missteps necessarily negate the greatness that was there originally. And I think a lot of people that are my age or maybe even younger than me can't really deny that the first heavy band they heard was Korn. Or if it wasn't Korn, it was a band that was extremely derivative of Korn. And I think that, anybody that wants to be the metalhead elitist or say that, I'm above that, or I'm above new metal, or I'm above all these bands that were a little bit more trendy at the time, I think that they're doing themselves a big disservice if they haven't checked out the newest Korn record. I think everything that you love about that band is still present in the Serenity of Suffering. And, hey, extra points for Corey Taylor being on the record. Yeah. And, we didn't hear that before. Definitely something that should have happened a couple of decades ago. my opinion. But it definitely enhances it. It makes you realize that, you know what, this band is still extremely good at doing what they do. And my final thought is that you should check out Korn. Korn's not a band that you need to be ashamed of.
I stand by what I've said, but I'll say it again. Only it's a different way because it's 2018. I stand by Korn. I like what they've done. They've had missteps. I think the stereotype of any long-running mainstream act is they start here, they peak, they have a misstep, and then they get back on track. And that's the part of everyone's career where they just start making records that, quote, I want to hear, or the fan wants to hear. You know, James Hetfield once said, it's not about doing the opposite of what the fans want. It's about having fun and trying something new. And when I think about trying something new, having fun, and then they were put in the situation where they were down 2 people, but they had obligations to put a record out, they probably just tried something different. And I don't think that outweighs the good things that they've done, except for that one thing. But my final thought
What's
on
that one thing, Joe?
I will not say it. That thanks, dude. But to answer the question about corruption in music reviewing, I will say this. Rolling Stone said that Saint Anger was a 4-star record.
Oh, I mean,
what does that tell you about what the mainstream will have to say about the Path of Totality?
Got Us in the Doorway was 5 stars. They had a U2 record as like the best of the year, or one of the best of the year, and it hadn't even come out yet. I mean, yeah, Rolling Stone. I was listening to the New York Times podcast recently, and they had a bunch of writers on there, and they said that they would submit stuff for various reviews, and it would be a 4-star review, and then they'd print it, and it'd be a 3-star review. Or, you know, that 3.5-star review, you know? So, I mean, there's things go into editorial, and, you know, there's an image and an idea to maintain, you know? I mean, here's the thing. Mark Knopfler just needs to poop out a record. Rolling Stone's ready with a 3.5-star review.
Absolutely.
Doesn't even need to listen.
Nice.
Lorin, what is your album of the week?
Does not have to be heavy.
Oh, well. My album of the week is Code Orange, Forever.
Are you serious?
Love them.
That's awesome.
Oh my God.
I was not expecting that.
I was in Pittsburgh for a wedding about a week or so ago, and I'd been listening to them a little bit, and I went to this record store there, and they had they had Forever, and they had the record before, I Am King. So I picked them both up. Guy rang me up, was like, yeah, dude, fucking Code Orange, they're the real deal, they're real Pittsburgh blood. And I was like, all right, man, you know? And then I actually tweeted that out, and then Code Orange retweeted it and said, awesome. Respect to Eads, which was the record store I bought it from. And this is the thing I'm finding, and maybe you're finding this too, Dan, when you're going out and buying or big thrifting or whatever, is that the metal genre is still the genre where, like, you can get like new CDs, and that's like still the only people that are buying physical media.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I read a blog post that what's his name, Rob Flynn did recently, and he said that the thing with is that people were talking to him that like the streaming numbers for the new Machine Head record were bad. He's like, they're bad for all metal records because metal fans don't fuck with streaming. They still buy the vinyl, they still buy the CD. And I was talking to the clerk, and he's like, you notice our metal selection? It's like our primary section now because we still can move those, you know, but everybody else we can't move.
That blows my mind because I remember whenever we did the Roach Koach episode, and you guys came back on your following episode, and you were like, yeah, Discography Discussion, they talk about heavy bands that I definitely would not check out. So to hear you a few months later be like, yeah, dude, I'm really digging Code Orange. I'm like, fuck yeah. That's
I mean, every day I am constantly finding myself listening to like heavier stuff that I would never have listened to 2, 3, 4 years ago.
I told you.
Yeah. It gets in your blood, man. Here's the thing, though. I gotta pace myself. I'll listen to that, and then I'm gonna listen to something super soft that I won't mention on the show. But yeah, something.
Hey, I'm a
soft.
huge Copeland fan, so I mean, I get it. It's one of those like weird things where, well, I got to mention this, as far as Pennsylvania bands go, Zao.
Oh yeah,
Pennsylvania.
Oh really?
Great band.
Which Zao record is your album of the week, Dan?
It's not actually. This is funny because Lorin beat me in the heaviness department. I'm still really stuck on The End of All Things to Come by Mudvayne because I loved that record when it came out, and then I just didn't listen to it whenever I got into heavier stuff. But then I go back, I listen to a band like Mudvayne, and I'm like, is it heavier stuff? Like it's one of those like, yeah, Mudvayne has that commercial appeal that a lot of heavy bands don't have, but like I've before I listened to your guys' episode on The End of All Things to Come, I was still very much of the mindset of you can't top LD50, and I don't think necessarily that The End of All Things to Come tops LD50, but I do think that it's definitely the most listenable out of the two. Like, because you still have to be a certain kind of person to appreciate LD50. You almost have to be a musician to appreciate some of the crazy stuff that goes on in that record. But LD50 isn't necessarily a very listenable record in the sense that like there's a lot of weird ambient tracks that are in there, and like a lot of empty space is on LD50, and the songs don't necessarily flow together the way that they should flow. But The End of All Things to Come fixes all of that. There's one silent track, but it's thrown on, towards the end of the record. And like, it could be argued that maybe it's not as heavy, but I almost think that's more of like a sound production thing. Sometimes the more raw a record sounds, the heavier it sounds. But like with The End of All Things to Come, like, yeah, Dig is a great song. Death Blooms is a great song, but you still have to be a certain kind of a person to enjoy those songs. You don't necessarily have to know anything about the band to listen to Not Falling.
Right. It's a more accessible track.
Absolutely, but it's still got the technicality of Mudvayne. It's still got the heaviness of Mudvayne. It's got everything that you liked about the band in LD50, but it's more geared towards like, hey, maybe your friend that doesn't necessarily listen to heavy music might actually enjoy this, and that really stood out to me, and it's actually gotten in the way of some of the bands that we're supposed to be listening to for the show, and that I'm like, man, this is really good, but I don't know if I like it as much as I like The End of All Things to Come, and so it's one of those weird things where like, this is a total role reversal in that you're telling me about the awesome metalcore stuff. I don't know if you call Code Orange metalcore, but pretty close. And I'm the one that's like, no, man, this new metal record from 2005 is this shit. And it's so funny because I bought a bunch of like Creator albums and like Entombed, like some death metal stuff. Whenever I had that CD shop binge or whatever. And like the record I've listened to the most out of all of it was The End of All Things to Come, which is just really interesting. So Joe, you've got to break this weird contradiction I'm seeing.
I don't have to break shit. I'm getting ready for New Metal May. Il Nino, Revolucion.
Nice.
Whoa.
Yeah, we're going to do an El Nino episode in May.
Bring it on, man. That's all I have to say.
Right.
We're going to do a... who are we talking about New Metal May? Let's see. We got...
We're doing Mudvayne, Primer 55, Il Nino, and if a certain group of new metal individuals likes to show up and hang out with us for a while, we're doing Third Strike and Fifth Element in a double feature.
Which is me and Joe's favorite new metal albums. But those are bands that only put out one album each. So
That'll
in
be
a
an
case
easy
like
one.
that, in a case like that, we do.
And you've already done half the work.
We do a double header. Yeah, we'll be referencing back to what you guys said about Third Strike. But actually, I was really impressed because when I heard that episode, because Joe was like, "Yeah, I don't know what they're going to think of it. Yeah, yada 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 yada." And I listened to it, and I was like, "Well, some songs made it into the canon, which is a lot more than a lot of these records can say." You know, the Fifth Element though, that one's kind of an ass move on my mates. I keep talking about the Fifth Element like they're this band that was like really big. Dude, they were a band that was local to us that played nu metal, and they put out a record, and I loved it. But like, as far as being able to find it anywhere, it's like
you can't.
It's impossible. It's impossible. Yeah. If you guys were to ever cover that on the show, and I mean like 4 years from now, because you just don't have anything left, I'll just send you the shit. Like I'll send you the. I'll do an actual. I'll do a for real fan submission where I send you the record.
Well, here's the thing. We've already had a guy from Australia. He mailed us Super Heist and Sunk Lodo.
Nice.
Sunk Lodo. Man. Very nice.
Yeah.
I was surprised you guys did Puya. Like that was
the Puya push was so heavy. We couldn't deny it. I mean, that's the funny thing is everyone, and I don't know if you want to keep this in or not, is that people are, always asking us to do a lot of albums or bands, what have you. And it's literally comes down to like what we are feeling like doing, but also is there like a legit, like people really want to hear this?
Right.
Because I think if we were operating in like a vacuum, I think
there would be no sound.
That would be one. But I think also we probably would have done like the second Stained record at this point, And
fuck yeah, though, because it's Break the Cycle. Come on.
Well, yeah, but we haven't done it yet. I mean, that's the thing is that there's a lot of records that I thought, by the time we get to, if we, when we started getting into it, like by the time we get to episode 100, we'll have done this, and we haven't done them yet. Because we keep getting pushes to do things like Puya, and people are recommending. I mean, I'm trying to think what's another one. I mean, yeah, Simon Says is one that's come up a bunch. People keep talking about Stuck Mojo, that we should do them.
You should do Stuck Mojo.
Yeah, so that's another one that, and it's just that it's and then obviously there's that big Mushroom Head push. So, we've got, all these bands to do. And it used to be initially that we weren't, we thought, well, we'll put like, we won't repeat a band unless there's like 10 episodes in between it. So, you won't hear like another Korn album for like at least 10 episodes. But now we have so many that we could do like a different band every week and not repeat for like a year. So, yeah.
We're the same way, like with bands, like we've done these revisited. We weren't going to do revisited episodes. Like, we weren't even going to talk to people. Like, we weren't going to have people on Skype and do, what we're doing now. But, like with Korn, we did, whenever, the thing about the revisited episodes was we got the opportunity to talk to Jared Montague from Taproot. He was like, well, I want to talk about Metallica. And then I was like, oh, well, do I be an asshole or do I just do it, And because our first episode was on Metallica, because we figured that was the easiest band to talk about. That was the band we didn't have to do any research on, whenever we did the podcast. And so we were like, well, shit, do we talk about Metallica again or do we not? And it's like, dude, it's with the drummer from Taproot. You've got to do it. So we did it. And then we were like, okay, well, now we're in this weird thing. Like when we had James Rolfe on, we didn't talk about every Black Sabbath album because that would have taken 6 hours.
That's a lot of records.
Yeah. And this dude was like super, it was pretty evident after talking to him for 10 minutes that he knew way more about Black Sabbath than we did. And so I was like, shit, this could go out of control. So we just did like a general discussion. And then that went really well. And then we were like, okay. So now we're kind of at this point where every band gets at least 2 shots. You get the general discussion shot, and then you get the discography discussion shot. And, usually the regular discography discussions is just us doing it. Although we have had guests in the past that have just wanted to do the album by album.
Yeah, I used to be incredibly precious about like the listen. Like the first listen was like, oh, I have to go home and like be sitting there with it. And then, life gets busier and you have less time like that. And then I was like, well, now I can listen to my car. I'll do that. And now I'm at the point, like if I can get a listen in, I don't even have like, we're moved now, but my old stereo system is like still in a box in the basement. So if I'm listening to anything over speakers, it's in my car. My dream is to get a good stereo system again. My dad has an old, like, his still has his original thing with all of the mixer. Why can't I think of the word?
Amplifier, transformer,
yeah, the whole thing, yeah, and it's awesome. And there's a guy I know from back in my radio days, and he was like, whenever you get settled wherever you end up living, this is back when I was living in like an apartment, he's like, let me know, I will hook you up, because I can tell you the type of guy who wants like the best system. And I was like, thank you very much. So one day I'll have to text him and see what's up.
Well, and that's Jeff too. If you have any old video games laying around, let him know. He'll probably mail you some stuff. But yeah, it's definitely. My wife did not appreciate that though. Like when I was listening to Korn all week, because we have 3 kids, so it's one of those like you can't just listen to that. And I was like, "What are you talking about? I listen to Cannibal Corpse all the time." She's like, "Well, they can't understand that." That's just noise. She's like, but the stuff like Korn, where it's like all day I dream about sex and bitch, because we have 2 girls, and so it's like she's like, you can't just pop that stuff on and listen to it in the car or listen to it.
I basically am only listening to stuff over headphones, and then if I'm in the car with my son, I don't generally listen to anything for the show, because I'm generally trying to listen for the show, and so if he's making noise or anything, then I'm not going to be paying attention to it. So yeah, I'm able to like keep that kind of separate. And also like, he goes through phases where he's like I'll watch some music videos on YouTube or something on my TV, and he'll be fine with it, and then all of a sudden he'll flip out, and I'll be like, okay, then he's done. The only band that he's consistently been fine with when I watch their YouTube videos is Cold Chamber. Okay. I don't know if it's a coincidence or just what have you, but
Cold Chamber turned out to be a really positive band, over time, you know. You go to that first record, you're like, oh, wow, this is really scary. And then you get to chamber music, and you're like, this band's fine.
Yeah, respect your dad, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. But yeah, I guess it's probably like almost midnight for you, so.
Yeah.
Well, I know we all got
kind of raw, so.
Those of us with kids have Easter in the morning.
And on that note, this has been episode 60 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. $1 gets you access to an exclusive feed. We'll be talking about that later. Lorin Kozlowski and the Roach Koach can be found at gabbermedia.com/Roach Koach and on Twitter @Roach Koach. Did I get that right?
And Facebook.
But yeah, you got it right.
I always switch back and forth. Sometimes when you do an episode on Facebook, I'll comment. When you do an episode, I'll comment on Facebook, or sometimes I do Twitter, and it's always kind of funny because I think one episode you guys actually read both, which I was like, oh, yeah. But like, it was crazy. But
all right, well, thank you so much for having me, you guys. This has been a lot of fun.
Anytime.
Yeah,
for sure.
Where the self-titled record feels, I can't talk apparently today. I can't enunciate. It's a problem. Where the self-titled, wow, really, dude?
You want me to take it? You want me to come back to you?
Where the self-titled record